So welcome everybody. If you're just joining, this is the session on a chemistry remote learning resource that's about how a pressure cooker works. And specifically, students are going to be exploring phases at a molecular level and phase changes and gas pressure in order to come up with an explanation for how a pressure cooker works or why it's so much faster than a regular pot. So first, let's go ahead and do some introductions and talk over some agreements. I'll introduce myself. I know I see a lot of really friendly, familiar faces, which is really great, especially when you're cooped up inside for so long. My name is John Salazar, for those of you who do not know me. And I work for New Visions for Public Schools, of course, on the science team. And I've been there for 5.5 years now, working mostly on earth science and chemistry, supporting our schools in those two content areas. Libby, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Libby Chatham. I'm also on the New Vision Science team. I've been focusing on living environment and a little bit on physics. And I'm the host for this meeting. So anything that comes up with technical issues or problems, or you just get lost somewhere, you can always chat me. My name on this webinar is NVPS. So just chat me privately and I can try to help you out.
Thank you, Libby. And my colleague Kieran, I believe, joined a moment ago. Kieran, did you want to introduce yourself as well? I know you did in the chat window, but.
Hi, I'm not sure if I'm unmuted, but I'm Kieran. I work with John and Libby at New Visions.
Hey, Kieran. And welcome to not only the returning faces from our in-person PDs, but also all the new people. And thanks for introducing yourself and sharing your dishes in the chat window. So I want to just mention that this is sort of part of a webinar, science webinar series. Now I'm doing learning plans and webinars for both earth science and chemistry. So you'll see that there's one on May 7th for earth science. But this one today is focused on implementing a chemistry learning plan about pressure cooker, as we've mentioned, but with the focus of using Google Classroom. And so if you weren't a chemistry teacher, you could think about the ways that we're using Google Classroom to implement learning plans for other content areas. On May 7th from 11 to 12 p.m., we are going to be looking at a earth science learning plan focused on the formation of the Pacific Ring of Fire. But if you're interested on learning about how to facilitate peer-to-peer discussion in a remote setting, you're more than welcome to join that webinar to learn about that. And then on May 14th, we're again going to use the same learning plan, but with a different focus. And this time it's going to be on formative assessment and evidence of mastery and feedback. Formative assessment, evidence of mastery, and feedback, which we all know is really important right now with these changes with the Regents exam and like demonstrating that evidence of mastery and making sure that you're giving students proper feedback so they could get there. So just a quick overview of today's agenda. We're going to sort of at a high level look at the instructional model and the different parts of this pressure cooker learning plan. We're going to do launching a remote learning lesson. So we're going to do the launch for this particular learning plan. And then we're actually going to do some work time, which is like the independent time that students, or could be independent time that students are working on the additional activities after the launch. And then we're going to have a chance to, from a teacher perspective, explore the learning plan a little bit more in depth and talk about it and raise some questions or comments about it. And then lastly, we're going to look at some tips for using Google Classroom. What are the best ways? We'll think about that as a group. What are the best ways for using Google Classroom in the current context? And if you haven't seen this learning plan at all, again, you're going to have a chance to explore that a little when we do some breakouts, the second breakout session toward the end of today's workshop. Let's also go through some goals and agreements. Everybody's on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to do that. So as I mentioned, we want to introduce you to an instructional model that we've worked on that we think is useful for this particular remote learning context. And we're going to focus on Google Classroom and thinking about like how to effectively use that with this learning plan and other learning plans. And we're going to model some best practices, looking at like synchronous learning, also going to look at some asynchronous learning, and using Google Classroom for assigning assignments. And then we'll talk a little bit briefly at the end about like the different ways that New Visions for Public Schools is offering support for remote learning. We'll look at the remote learning site and office hours and some upcoming webinars. So norms and agreement. First, I'll share some technical norms. Libby's already mentioned that she has control. She's the host, so she'll have everybody on mute, not because she has anything personal against anybody, but when we have a larger group, it's easier if we don't have all the background noise. So there will be points where we ask you to unmute yourself and share if you choose to. But for the most part, we'll have you on mute. And again, please chat Libby. She's MVPS in this session. That's her username, and you can ask her questions if you have any issues. We'll be making all these resources available, the slides, instructional materials, a recording of the webinar after the session, so don't worry about that. And as I just mentioned, we will be recording so that others can access the information from this meeting at a later time. We're going to post it on our site. So some social and emotional norms. I think hopefully we're all doing fine. We're all safe and sound at home, but I know that it's been challenging at times to be by myself and trying to navigate all these different platforms and things that I'm not used to. It's not something that I really ever did as a part of my regular work. It was all in-person stuff. And so I think we should just like really recognize, acknowledge the complexity and the emotional difficulties, and just be good with each other and help each other out. And along with that, we all have various levels of comfort with Zoom and different online platforms. And so let's just be really patient, exhibit wait time, make sure that everybody's feeling included. All right, so first part of the agenda is we're gonna do a fly overview of this resource. And Libby's actually gonna go ahead and chat the resource. You don't necessarily need to be looking at it right now, but if you wanna have it available, she will put that in the chat window. And I also wanna show you how you can find this resource, because this chat window will disappear after the session. So actually, whoops. Let me go ahead and go to this site here real quick. And so this is the homepage for the New Visions for Public School Remote Teaching and Learning. And again, we'll be sharing that. You'll be get shared on these slides, so you'll be able to access this link. And I would suggest bookmarking it so you could access it really easily in the future if that's something you're going to want to do. But we're going to go here to curriculum and resources. And so there's different content areas. Go to science. You could also access it through this little tab. And now we're on the science remote learning site. And so you're going to see all these little tiles of the remote learning plans that we developed so far. So we have some for, this is actually the first one for chemistry. There have been a couple for earth science, a couple for living environment, and then we have like these cool COVID-19 learning plans, which I know Kieran just developed one that was a LE COVID-19 learning plan. And then previously you heard another colleague had developed one that was a living environment slash algebra, I believe. You could correct me if I'm wrong. Kieran, let me look right here. Basically, it was a math and living environment learning plan. So looking at some data and looking at like exponential growth. So I just want to mention that these are all here. You click on link to the resource and it'll open up that teacher guide for each one of the resources. And hopefully, if you have some colleagues you think that will be interested, hopefully you can share this with them as well. Okay. So I'm sure most of you have learned about some of these changes to the regents and credits and so on and so forth. I want to go ahead and give you a moment to read through the slide. I might highlight just a couple things after that.
Any records of how fast and tight now, because that is always a sticking point. That's even internally, people are like, wait a second, like you're going after Jane, we're going after Jane. Like it becomes this whole people don't understand. So I'm always looking for that. Clear about that.
So yeah, I mean, as you might have gathered from one of the norm slides that we have about SEL, I think not only for us, New Vision Public Schools, but also the DOE send out communications regarding the emphasis on social emotional learning right now, and just really helping students make sense of things that matter, their communities and lives. And again, and also just because, I mean, the region's been canceled, so it's an opportunity to really think about like the science that matters and brings more meaning to students' lives. And along with the fact that the Regents is canceled, we know that schools are going to need some support around thinking about how they provide opportunities for students to show evidence of mastery so that they get the credit for their courses. And even beyond this year, we're really thinking about this like asynchronous and synchronous learning in a remote learning environment, because we don't know anything for sure yet. But there is a chance that even going into next year, there will be at least some time that we're going to be delivering instruction in this remote setting. So we want to make sure that we're starting to think about how we might do that and start to collect some ideas that we really want to concretize and carry over into next year.
He was aware of the Lilly compromise, but I think you're reacting.
And so I've mentioned some of these terms already, but I just want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language here, because a lot of these terms might be new for some of us. So synchronous instruction is online in real time, like we're doing right now. Everybody's meeting in one place at one time. Asynchronous instruction, we're actually going to give you an experience with that a little later, but that would be some time where students or learners can work at their own pace. And then blended instruction is sort of like overall what we're modeling today, is where a portion of the webinar is going to be synchronous, and then a portion is going to be asynchronous, and that's what blended instruction is. All right, so this is a 50,000-foot view of this particular learning plan, and this is actually really a good example of the instructional model of all of our learning plans, which starts with a launch, which I'll get a little bit more into in a moment, where you sort of frame things, you might surface student prior knowledge, and just set expectations for the learning plan. Work time, which again, could be done synchronously. We're going to do that, a little chunk of that today, asynchronously, when you go into breakout rooms together. So that's like a series of activities that starts to help students to make sense of this phenomenon about the pressure cooker. And then you're going to want to create, or we're suggesting you create some check-in time too for feedback for students. And that could be either peer-to-peer feedback or feedback from you as well, of course. And then after that period of work time and check-in, and students might have revised some of the work based on that feedback, there's a final activity where they sort of wrap it up. You bring some closure to this question about why does a pressure cooker help allow us to prepare our meals so much faster than just a regular open pot and stuff. So let's go into this a little bit more in detail. So first we have the launch here, and just frames it with this question: why do pressure cookers cook our food faster? And so we'll be looking at experiencing this in a little bit, but we'll watch a video about the preparation of chicken soup in a pressure cooker. And then we're going to share some observations and initial ideas, or note some observations and share initial ideas about why is this taking place? Why is it going so much faster? I learned a lot by developing this investigation. It was really interesting. Then there will be some work time, as I mentioned before. And so this particular learning plan is actually really focused on the use of a simulation, or a couple of different simulations from PhET. And so students will answer a question about how are liquids, solids, liquids, and gases different on the molecular level. So really just reviewing this content if they have seen it before, or also an opportunity to just learn about it as they go through the activity. And they're using a simulation to explore the differences between these different phases. And then they're going to create a diagram of what they think is happening at the molecular level to the water and the ice in a pressure cooker. And then they get into what causes pressure inside a container. And again, this is at molecular level. They're using simulation, effect simulation again, called gas properties. And based on this exploration where they go through a series of observations and respond to questions, they're going to create, again, some diagrams that show what causes pressure at the molecular level in a pressure cooker. And in case we don't get a chance to look at this, if you look at the handouts later, there's some really clear instructions of how students can create and submit these instructions and criteria for them. And just two of those possibilities are to either use Google Draw in the document directly, or they could sketch it on a piece of paper, take a photograph, insert it in the document, you could send it to the teacher directly through email. So I just want to mention that in case you don't have a chance to look at it during the session. Then, as we mentioned, there's the check-in time. And this is a chance for, again, peer and teacher support. You could maybe use discussion boards in Google Classroom. You could comment on student work directly on a Google Doc, or perhaps you could encourage students or have them set up times to chat with each other over the phone or through email and share some of their work and give each other feedback. And then there's a wrap up. So they're going to refine their responses as needed based on that feedback. There's then now they've had an opportunity to actually make sense of this on their own and come up with their own explanations. They watch a video that explains the science of the pressure cooker, noting ideas from the video that confirm their thinking, those that cause them to refine their thinking, and then one final prompt asking them to explain the difference between a pressure cooker and a regular open pot on the stove. Why does a pressure cooker actually cook faster? What is that difference between the pressure cooker and the regular pot? So now that I've had a chance to go through this overview, I want you to take a moment. Think about if you have any questions so far, please go ahead and share them in the chat window right now. Give you about a minute or so to post those questions. Julia is asking about the discussion board in Classroom, if it's a separate app or a document, what format does it take on? I believe that's embedded in Google Classroom. Kieran, can you speak to that? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you can answer that question, it'd be great.
No, it's okay. You're not putting me on the spot. It's not a very robust discussion board. So when we're talking about discussion, we're just talking about literally a place to put comments and potentially respond to one another. It's not as elaborate as what you might be thinking of as a discussion board, but it is a place to do a discussion.
Great, thanks, Sharon. And Janaki is also asking a question, can we use this learning plan on a different platform other than Google Classroom? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the learning plan, it is Google Doc based, but it's not already embedded into a Google Classroom class. So I know that certain platforms work better with Word documents, that some platforms work better with PDF documents. And if you don't know how to download your own copy in those versions, look at our YouTube playlist. I made a video about that. But essentially, you just go to File at the top of the file, Google Doc, and then you just put Download As, and then pick the format that you want that's most usable on the platform that you are using. And Janaki, we're going to use Google Classroom today. You're going to see that a little bit later. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Kieran's question. Microsoft Teams. Great. Okay. I don't see any other questions. We're going to go ahead and move on. And again, I'm going to have a chance to explore this further later. We're going to go ahead and do the asynchronous launch to the activity. Again, this could be the framing here. Pressure cookers allow us to cook food a lot faster than a regular pot, but why? You see all these tasty meals here that we could prepare with a pressure cooker. And so we're going to watch a video, and during the video, I simply want you to note 3 observations and consider the phases, whether it's a liquid or gas or solid, of the different ingredients that are shown in the video. And then Libby, you want to go ahead and share that?
John, I can share it, but I can't play it out loud. It does have closed caption possibility, so I don't know if you want to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Mm-hmm.
We're just not going to have the entertaining music that goes along with it, but that's okay. Not really the most important part. All right, I know what I'm making for dinner tonight. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to note some observations, just general ones, and specifically about the different phases of the ingredients in a pressure cooker. Oops. Now I want you to think about those observations and the fact that it took 13 minutes to prepare this delicious chicken noodle soup in this pressure cooker. And I want you to just brainstorm as many ideas as you can about the reasons that a pressure cooker helps us cook our food so much faster. And once you've brainstormed those ideas, I'll give you about a minute, minute and a half. I want you to chat your #1 best idea, the one that you feel most confident about, in the chat window. Let's take about the next minute and a half to do that. I like that conservation of energy. Great. So thinking about some of these underlying principles that might be at play here. Gas laws. Okay, great. Great. Somebody's mentioning pressure and temperature increases. Yeah, so I'm seeing a trend of things related to pressure and temperature. Give it about another 30 seconds or so. And this is great. They don't have to be totally complete ideas at this point. Even just like certain terms or concepts that you think are related is a great way to start this. Heat and energy. All right. Give another moment, and we're going to go ahead and keep going here and actually jump into the rest here. All right. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your initial ideas. I think we're off to a good start. Have some ideas that we can work with, and we can continue to explore whether they're totally correct, maybe a little incomplete, or we might just change our thinking based on this investigation. Great. Another high heat and pressure response. All right, so we are going to jump into the portion of this. We're going to work asynchronously in Google Classroom. But first, I just want to hear from all of you some of the different ways that you've been using Google Classroom, if at all. If you haven't, that's okay too. You could say you haven't used it, or maybe you know how someone else has used it. I'll give you a minute to go ahead and respond to this in the chat window. And I encourage you all to, I'm sure if you don't already have the chat window open, even if you don't have a response, check out what your colleagues are sharing. It might give you some ideas. Yeah, it's a really nice central place to assign for students to access the assignments that you've assigned, and for you to go ahead and go into the assignments and provide feedback and grading. I'm seeing you don't even have to collect it, it's already there if you're doing it in Google Classroom. Quizzes are popular too. I've seen a lot of teachers that are using it in that way. Great, yeah, we're using videos as well. You could email, survey students about how things are going. Yeah, a ton of things that you could do all through this one central platform. So I think that's what's really nice about it. It gives you some data and tests. Yeah. All right. Just another moment. We're going to keep going and actually have an experience with it. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm learning a few things here that I might try next time around. Okay, so we're in a moment going to put you into breakout groups where you're going to work on just a small part of one of the first activity in the work time portion of this learning plan. So you can either go to Google Classroom and access it with the code that's right there on the screen. I think Libby is going to chat that to everybody in case you are having a hard time grabbing it off this slide. Or you could go to the invitation that I sent you. You should have received an invitation via email probably within the last couple hours. And you could access it that way. And when you get in there, you're going to find the assignment, how are solids, liquids, and gases different at the molecular level? And you're going to work in a group to complete as much as you can, and we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes. I do want to mention you'll probably only get through the first page. You'll access the simulation, get the document open. You should have your own copy, but you're all discussing the same document. And try to go through some of the steps. There is a part where students are asked to draw some diagrams of different phases. I'm not going to ask you to actually try to take a photograph of that or do it with Google Draw. Maybe you just sketch it on a piece of paper, and then you can share it with your colleagues on the screen to confer and give each other feedback. So you're going to have about 10 minutes, and Libby is going to go ahead and put you into breakout rooms. All right, so we're going to do a little debrief around this use of Google Classroom. And also just comparing the synchronous experience that we had from the launch, where we were all talking at the same time, looking at the video, sharing some initial ideas about what makes a pressure cooker cook so much faster, and then this asynchronous experience. And think about the one that we just had on Google Classroom a moment ago, and think about the pros and cons. So at this point, you could either share in the chat window, but I think it's a small enough group if you want to just raise your hand, let us know that you want to share, or simply just unmute yourself and share some ideas about, let's start with synchronous experience. What were some of the pros and cons around that?
Can I share?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for volunteering.
So for the synchronous experience, I feel like now that we're on spot and like we're all doing together, I feel like sometimes we're all getting confused at some point, like, and also the time it's not too long to think. And yeah, so that's one thing. But pros definitely, like we're all in together, we're like sharing it at each other. But the cons would be like not enough time to discuss.
Mm-hmm. And wait,
Uh,
I'm sorry, who is this that's sharing right now?
Cypher.
Fair. Yeah, that, I mean, sorry, if you didn't finish your point, go ahead, but I did really like one thing that you said so far.
Oh, I see. Okay, so for a synchronous experience, I said the pros would be like we are all in the same place together, but then we are
Mhm.
not having enough time to discuss. For the asynchronous would be like opposite, like we might not be together, but we have enough time to think.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And thank you so much for highlighting that part about think time. Like maybe because it was adults and I didn't do a great job of modeling that, but I think that's super important if you are doing this asynchronous experience with students, is have this very explicit think time built in so that creates access to a wider range of students. Because not all students, not all adults even, and I should have maybe had that in mind a little more, um, can think as quickly as others, or they just like to process a little bit longer before they're comfortable sharing. So thanks for sharing that. Anybody else want to share pros and cons to either synchronous or asynchronous?
I think like Jacques said in the chat, I think we need more practice in the breakout room. So just getting comfortable with switching, going to the breakout room, and then accessing the documents. We're still, I mean, I know I'm still a little leery, and then that just adds to the pressure. But I think with practice, this would, for synchronous, it's nice to work with other people. Asynchronous would be good if you can't log on at a specific time and you work at your own pace. So
yeah, and I think that's a really good point, especially if it's the first time. Just provide some time to make sure all students are able to get on Google Classroom. Actually, maybe send that out in advance. That's something for me to think about for the next time. Make sure everybody has plenty of time, could ask questions, and are ready to go for those breakout sessions so they can really focus on the work. Any other thoughts? And again, go ahead and just unmute yourself if
Yeah,
you want to share.
my issues have been with my students is not all of them have consistent internet access. So asynchronous has been best for us. It's more of an internet access ability thing.
Mm-hmm. And even that launch, I mean, I've seen teachers that have done, like, they want to do asynchronous, but they still want to sort of provide that framing verbally. So they'll record something similar to what I did today. But that's a really good point. The range of access to technology is really wide. And so that's something to be really mindful of, which I'm sure all of you are doing right now. Any other thoughts before we move on? Yeah, and just one other thought related to the share just a moment ago is, yeah, I've seen teachers actually do both asynchronous, synchronous, blended styles in the classroom. But as far as like the point of like the synchronous part maybe not going that well so far, or the asynchronous part, I've seen that over time, as was mentioned before, you troubleshoot it, students get more used to it, and it just starts to flow a lot more smoothly. It's a transition for all of us, so that's, I think, expected. So some other things we want to add that we've heard, or just our own personal thoughts too, as a curriculum instruction team. With synchronous, the teacher can clear up confusion easily and quickly, so they can respond to student confusion in real time. As was already mentioned, may put some students at disadvantage in terms of access. And then on the other hand, with the asynchronous experience, somebody alluded to this, I think, in some form a moment ago, but yeah, it's tricky to support students, right? So you got to think about the different ways that you're going to provide them feedback or get them to provide each other feedback. All right. Okay, so we have some time here. We're going to take about 5 minutes to just walk through the module. And so Libby's going to send you into different random breakout groups. And you're going to go ahead and fill out this note catcher with space for each one of the categories. So the 3 lenses I want you to think about as you go through this. Oops. Is how many activities are there? What do you notice about due dates? What are the feedback opportunities that you're seeing? In what ways is there a low floor / high ceiling? And to clarify what I mean by that is basically like, how does this create access for students that might have different levels of prior knowledge and readiness to respond to questions? Is it this one like specific answer that you have to have, which maybe all students aren't going to really know how to respond to? Or does it really live like a wide range of possibilities to respond? Okay, so Libby's going to send us into those breakout rooms. We're going to use, she's going to send this tiny URL. And then you could just go ahead and you could see what other teachers have noted from the LE webinar, and you could add in your own ideas as well. Oh, it's Libby, I'll chat it to you right now. It's the one that tiny URL, but I could give it to you. So I invite you to take a look at the document where people share their ideas about these different discussion prompts. We talked about rubrics for ways to provide feedback, or sort of like guidelines to provide feedback, and for students to have clarity around what's expected for different parts of this. There were 6 activities. There's due dates for all of them, so students have again, are clear about the expectations as far as due dates are concerned. And as I mentioned, we talked about a little bit about what low floor, high ceiling means. So I invite you to keep looking at that and thinking about that question, because I think designing questions like that can provide more access for a wider range of students. So just some final notes, the next steps, and I'm going to ask you to provide some feedback. We always really appreciate your feedback. So some ways that we are providing support, we've been offering office hours, and this is where you can maybe follow up for one of these webinars and just ask additional questions. We could act as thought partners, myself, Libby, or Kieran. We actually don't have any scheduled right now for the future because we weren't getting a lot of attendance, to be honest. But you could certainly feel free to email myself, Libby, or Kieran. If it's about this chemistry plan, it would be me, probably the best person, and we could schedule some time to talk through any questions you have, or if you want to just want me as a thought partner or anything. And then our remote learning website I showed you, we're going to update that with new resources about every 3 weeks with different learning plans. I'm not sure when the next chemistry one will be there, but there will be Earth Science COVID-19 LE within the next couple of weeks or so. And then, yeah, just go to that website, stay tuned for our next resource and next webinar. I'm supposed to show the slide about that. New Visions is hiring right now. So if you or colleagues you know are looking for a new environment, a new setting, and New Visions is of interest to you, you can access this slide later. And then, Libby, if you could just chat the feedback form, which should be in that agenda, to everybody. And again, if you take the time to fill that out, I would really appreciate it, or we would all really appreciate it, because we certainly take a good, close look at that to inform the planning of future sessions.